Good evening, Facebook friends and families, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where you learn that health is wealth. Remember that this broadcast is for information purposes only, but we try to share the best information with you, with our healthcare providers, that's possible. So we just want to remind you to share, share, share. Come on in. Come on in. Remember to start your watch parties and share. What night is it? Monday. And it's what? Couch Conversations with the Doctors. We're going to go around our table as we do always, just to do our brief introduction, as always. And I'm going to start with the famous urologist to the stars, our very own Dr. Terry Mason, who was drawing up those vaccines yesterday like never before. Dr. Mason.
Good evening, Nikki. Thank you so much for the kind introductions. Always good here to be with my cohorts and folks that I respect tremendously and have a great time giving information out to the residents, not only of the 1st Congressional District, but the entire city. 2nd Congressional District. Okay. Well, he's the first in my mind. 7.
All right.
He's the first in my mind. How's that, Nikki?
There you go.
Thank you very much.
All right. To my very own co-worker who's with us here on this evening, Dr. Douglas Graham. Doug, can you introduce yourself to everybody here?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I'm a retired physician. I worked in the Chicago area for many years. Last year, I joined Representative Davis in his office as a congressional fellow. And I'll do my best to answer your questions if I can. It's great to be here.
Thank you so, so much. To that psychologist that always reminds us that wellness is so important. Wellness, and most of all, mindfulness. Our very own Dr. Jasmine Searcy. Dr. Searcy.
Hello, good evening. As always, it is such a pleasure to be here amongst great people here in the city of Chicago, as well as representing the 7th Congress district of Chicago. I have to make sure I get that right. I am so happy, and thank you so much for continuing to make a difference, even starting with the vaccinations yesterday. And I'm also here, like Dr. Mason and everyone else, to answer your questions, whether that's from a psychological perspective or just mental health wellness. So happy Monday.
Happy Monday, absolutely. To the gentleman who is a outstanding weight loss guru and that family medicine doctor who's determined to get you off medicine because he's going to teach you how to eat, and he promises that really his passion is to be on Iron Chef. Go right ahead, Dr. Tony.
Well, always happy to be here. I'm a family doctor and obesity doc with Advocate Aurora Healthcare, and I'm also a medical director with those guys. And it really, for me, is about just giving people a different way of looking at how to take care of themselves, reminding people that medication only treats symptoms, and you generally need to do lifestyle changes to really impact your health and the health of your family. So if you can do a good job yourself, then you can pass that on to the next generation and the next generation, and you can actually start a real nice family tree of health, and that's going to generate wealth. So I'm happy to be here, happy to answer questions.
I see Dr. Miller is trying to sign in. He's having a few. There he is, the man who says that I threatened him to be here on Monday nights, but we love him anyway. That's our very own Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, introduce yourself to everybody here. So as he unmutes himself, because he's just a little muted, so he's going to keep working on that, and while he's working on that, we're going to, there he goes. Go right ahead.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So happy to be on this panel this evening, and you see how excited I am. I was so excited that I forgot to do the technical stuff, but anyway, I'm glad to be here today. Hopefully we can answer a few questions and give a little bit of wisdom and keep the train moving.
All right. To that dad, that chef, and that guy who I want to say gave out more vaccines than any of Pete. I don't care what those nurses say. You were the man yesterday. They had their little competition of who could give the best injections, and no one could feel it. And they came from Pete. Now I know Crystal is watching and we love you, but Pete gets the certificate. I just gotta say it. I gotta say it. Pete, go right ahead. Introduce yourself to the people here.
But how's everybody doing? I'm just happy to be a part of that event. Kudos to the 7th Congressional District Congressman, Brother Danny Davis, and Nikki Harvey for putting on an event like that. And I'm proud that my organization's Near North was an integral part of that, as well as I think Howard Brown also. And just a tremendous event. And so for the record now, I'm used to ordering vaccines. I wasn't used to giving them. So I had to get a little crash course from one of the nurses, but they say once you do it, you sort of it came back quickly. But I think it was a tremendous statement, and I'm really proud that to be a part of that. Because as we know, the positivity rates are going up in the city, primarily with the younger people between 18 and 36. I think now we're at about 4% in Chicago. So that means that people are, letting their guards down a little bit. The bars are opening up, the lounges are opening up. And so it was more important that we show people we had a tremendous impact having, the community show up in the kudos to Pastor James Miller, Pastor Dr. James Miller, for putting that on. You have shown us really what physician leadership and community is all about. Kudos to Maya Green, Dr. Green. So again, I'm the director of medical support services at Near North over the HIV program and the MAT program. So I'm happy that my organization was a part of that as well.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Maya, Texas and Dr. Green says she'll be here shortly. She's on another meeting, but she is coming. She's on her way. To the man who created this, to the man who constantly reminds us all the time that health is wealth, to the one who is the vanguard on healthcare and
I think you froze up on us.
Nikki froze up.
I think so.
Congressman,
Well,
you want to bring us in?
That's all right. Let me tell you, I felt so good about doctors on yesterday until I had to pinch myself. I really, yesterday was Sunday. And folks who don't read the Bible, they probably don't necessarily know that Luke was a physician, one of the disciples. And I was saying to myself, because I had to make a little run, and on the run, of course, my radio was on. And Dr. Mason was on teaching people how to become doctors, because he had the kids on yesterday in the STEM program. And so he's talking about how you become a physician and what you need to do, and had these young people talking about what they're learning and how they're getting ready. And then as I got to the church down the street, there are these other doctors giving shots in the arm. And so I really just want to thank Near North. I mean, just a fantastic outfit. They're volunteers, not only the doctors and nurses, but other volunteers. I really want to thank Howard Brown, the clinic, their doctors and nurses and volunteers. Then there was a bunch of fellas who wearing black and gold shirts, and some of them was wearing purple stuff, and they were they were Alpha Phi Alpha brothers and Omega Phi Psi. And let me tell you, people were lined up around all the way from Rising Sun down past Christ Tabernacle at the other end of the block, around the corner. Young people. I mean, there were young people, teenagers, young adults who people say these youngsters won't get vaccinated. Not true. Young people. And they were conscious of what they were doing, why they were doing it. And I just felt great. I mean, if I wasn't Baptist and maybe it was Church of God in Christ or something, I might have been shouting or whatever. But it really was just a great day. It was wonderful. I want to thank Dr. Matthew Miller, who's Dr. James Miller's brother, because he opened up Rising Sun and let us use this great facility. And they both were there, you know, one giving the spiritual guidance that folks needed, and the other one giving the medical technology and science. Oh, it's just great. So, Nikki, it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful event. I understand that more than 1,200 people were vaccinated. That's a good number. You know, that's a great number. So I just want to thank everybody that was involved. And I had one heck of a weekend. And I had myself a nice salad after all of it was done. And, and then I put a little vinegar on it. So I did all right. So let's carry on and get this show on the road.
Sure thing, Congressman, sure thing. Mary Ballinger has stopped in and she says, good evening, everyone. Kathleen Jackson says it was a great event and hello to everyone. Sister Bonnie says, evening. Linda Johnson says, good evening, everyone. Good to see you, Dr. Jasmine. Good to see you, Dr. Jasmine. Melody Winston says, good evening, everyone. Hey, Melody Mel. Linda Johnson also says, yes, Congressman, they did an awesome job. There was a question posed on last week in reference to lupus. And Doug, I think you wanted to share some additional points that you said you forgot to share on last week.
Thank you, Nikki. You know, as soon as I said what I said last week, I kind of felt like my answer was dated. So I went back and I reviewed this subject, and I think there's some really interesting things to discuss tonight. And so part of this lies in your immune system. Your immune system is what fights off infections. And what we know is each geographic region selects for that best immune system for the infections in that environment. So when you compare the immune systems of people from West Africa to North Americans, they're not the same at all. And it turns out that those from West Africa have a primed immune system to respond in a more powerful way than North Americans. Both sides of the immune system, the B side and the T side. And the most striking part about this is I think that's a partial explanation as to why communities of color are so affected by COVID. They looked at the chemical reaction from COVID called cytokine storm, and it looks a lot like a flare of lupus. So this is one reason I can think of getting that vaccination. You don't want that storm to blow up on you. You want to be able to control that response. So that's a really good reason for getting that vaccination. So we know that historically, that if you are from a community of color, your genetic risks of developing lupus are higher than if you come from North America. But that's not really the only answer, because the genetic passing on is only about 20%. And the most interesting part about this is if you look at identical twins, the second twin doesn't often develop lupus. So there have to be environmental influences. Isn't that interesting? So if you look at the Hispanic communities, a really curious study was done. They looked at lupus in Hispanic communities in the United States and then in their countries of origin. And those in the United States had worse lupus. So there clearly are environmental factors. And the same is true for communities of color as well, that in the African American population, the severity of lupus is not the same throughout the United States. It's different in different geographic locations, which I thought was very, very interesting. So if you were to look at what are the biggest environmental risk factors, the leader of this in the Hispanic community says it's poverty. And we can break that down into some other really interesting variables. For instance, the biggest one is silica, which you're going to find in the construction trades. If you're sandblasting, if you're working on concrete, you're laying asphalt, you're working in mines, you get silica. Smoking is number two. And actually, I don't think it matters what you decide to burn and inhale. That's a factor. And the third is birth control. But after that, the other things are like air pollution, heavy metals, agricultural pesticides, organic solvents, and ultraviolet light falls to the bottom of the list. So it's very, very possible that people in communities of color are living in unhealthy environments. And the other thing to bring to the table is many people who have lupus, who are coming from communities of color, have more pre-existing conditions when they see the doctor. So it's like you're starting out the race 10 miles behind instead of at the same starting line. So those are things I thought I'd share with everyone tonight. Nikki, you're muted.
So sorry. Thank you so much, Doug, for that update. Thank you so much. Harriet Humphrey says, good evening. Sean Kennedy says, good evening, everyone. Yolanda Williams, good evening. And Karen says, good evening to the panel. I guess we'll just go right to these questions that we have. Our first question of the evening says, is it true that you can get COVID after being fully vaccinated?
Yeah, I'll take this one too. So the reality is even the most effective vaccine, which is Pfizer at 95%, you still could be in that 5% of people who are not or who will not have immunity post your second shot. The other factor that you have to keep in mind is that it takes 2 weeks after the second shot for you to reach that full 95%. So if you coincidentally get exposed, let's say after your first shot, or within that window of the 2 weeks before your or after your second shot, you could be in that window of people that can get COVID. But again, I think it's important for people to realize that you're only, it has an efficacy of 95%. So you have a small chance of being in that 5% of people who will not be immune.
I'll only add that as we kind of shared this talking point last time, and the efficacy is important, but it's not the most important thing. It's nice to not get the virus, but the thing we want to be focused on is not the 66% efficacy of Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca, which will eventually be approved. I think it's at 67%. It's, am I going to be hospitalized? Am I going to die? Am I going to end up on a ventilator? And every vaccine that we will likely approve will be 100% effective at preventing that. So there's no reason to wait for your favorite vaccine based on what you've heard about efficacy. And even the mayor of Detroit retracted his statement and said, you know what? Now that I see things a little clearer, I'm okay with my citizens to get any of those vaccines. So if you've come to the point where you're comfortable with the vaccine, you need to be comfortable with any of them, because at this point, everyone that's been approved is 100% effective at keeping you from dying. Ultimately, that's our goal. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Great.
Nikki, the other point to Dr. Hampton's point, it's also important that even though Johnson & Johnson does have a lower efficacy, it has been shown to be more effective with some of the newer variants that are out because their study was done later. So the people that were in that study had some of those variants in it, and that's the UK variant B117 and the South African variant. So there are pluses and minuses, and to Dr. Hampton's point, the main plus is you're protecting yourself against potential death and severe infection by getting vaccinated. Now, I had to help one of my patients today think through the risk, right? And so they were trying to say, well, I'm thinking about it. And so my big thing as a primary care doctor is to make sure that my patients have all the information so they can make a good decision for themselves. And so I said, well, what can I do to help you, make up your decision? And so she was basically asking me the risk. What about the side effects? Well, the side effects that may happen because of the vaccine pales in comparison to the effect of dying or becoming severely ill as a result of COVID-19. And then not to mention the long hauler syndrome, which about 24% of people that become infected can have long hauler syndrome, which means you have long-term problems, heart, lung, nerve problems as a result of having the COVID infection. So just helping people to think about risk. It's almost like, should I jaywalk across the street, or should I just walk a couple more yards and wait till the light to change? It's like, when you start thinking about it, and my job is not to influence anybody. My job is just to give you the information so you can make a good decision for yourself.
Well, I hope everybody waits on the light to change because I don't want nobody to get hit by a car. So I hope they waiting on that light to change. Mary Ballinger has an awesome question. Does the COVID vaccine also give a layer of protection against the flu or pneumonia?
No. Well,
Okay.
they're different, and I think the protection we're getting from the other, you don't see a lot of flu all of a sudden, right? You don't see a lot of pneumonia, and that's because we are doing those other things. We're wearing our masks, we're social distancing, we're wiping it. So it's like, well, man, we learned a valuable lesson. Maybe we need to do this more often. Maybe not the mask forever, but maybe we need to do those other things. And I saw all those frat brothers at the event yesterday, and I did not do one secret frat shake that day because, and I'm sure my brothers agree. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but we may have to reframe how we do things in the future to be safe. So it's just something to think about.
Great. Now, our next question says, if you have severe allergies, well, I think you guys have kind of answered this, but since I've started, if you have any type of severe allergies, which COVID vaccine should you take?
Yeah, I can help with that one. They're all pretty much the same in terms of your risk for severe and severe reaction as a result of the vaccine. So I think the main thing is that you are the main thing is that you make sure that you speak with your primary care doc to make sure that you're not at risk for an anaphylactic reaction. And let's be honest, it's a very small percent. I don't know what the exact percent of people who get anaphylactic reaction. That's the allergic reaction where you could die as a result of any particular drug, and that could be aspirin. It could be anything, but the rate of anaphylactic reactions is so low compared to the people that have the vaccine and have no problem. Now, here are the classic symptoms, and I talked about this a lot yesterday with people. You get soreness on your arm. You get soreness on your arm that lasts for about 12 hours. Sometimes some people can get a little fever. Sometimes some people can get a little fatigue. Feel like you ran a 10K. Not a full marathon, not a half marathon, but like a 10K. Jasmine, what's a 10K? That's like what, 6 miles?
A little over 5. So Yeah, so 5K, 3.10.
So you feel a
Yeah.
little run down. So you feel a little run down. Now, that's the classic symptoms. Now, myself and my wife got it, and we didn't have any symptoms. A little soreness on my arm that lasted 10 hours. So very low risk for severe allergic reaction as a result of the vaccine. And I don't think there's any difference between each one of the vaccinated the vaccine companies.
Yeah, I think one of the other things I'd just like to add to that, Nikki, is that for most people, when they say allergies, they're concerning, like hay fever kinds of things. They consider those as significant allergies, but that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about allergic reactions. We're talking about, as you said, anaphylactic, where you have a antibody response that causes other changes that can be and create a medical emergency. So, so if you have a problem with hay fever and you sneeze and you get a runny nose, that's not really a concern in this situation.
Yeah. I have a question. Easter is coming up for those of us who celebrate it. Would it be wise to visit family if we all have the vaccination?
So you're saying if if your family has the vaccine and you have the vaccine,
right?
I know that the CDC did issue something a few weeks ago saying that would be okay, even in that situation if the numbers are right, that you don't really even have to wear a mask in that setting.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna always come out with what I got to say. I can't let this go.
Come on, Dr.
Love it. I love it.
Why y'all laughing at me? But we got to remember, post-COVID, we still get over 1 million people that die every year from what we call cardiovascular disease and cancers. Every year. There is no vaccine for them. There is nothing that they can do other than change what they decide to put in their mouths that will make a difference in that trajectory. And I don't want that to be lost in this conversation around COVID. COVID is no question a real problem, but I want people to understand that even if you get vaccinated, and you should always think about how do you best vaccinate yourself from the comorbidities that are taking most Black people out that get COVID. And that's not the COVID itself as much as it is this enhanced response that we get because of the underlying inflammation from our obesity and diabetes and things of that nature. So I just want to make sure that we always keep that in the forefront because it's going to be here after COVID is gone.
Yeah. Just want to echo that and say amen, Dr. Mason, for that, because after COVID is over, we still got a lot of work to do.
I'll say this real quick, and it speaks to Dr. Mason's concern. Recently, they started something called the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. And metabolic disease is diabetes, dementia, hypertension, all that stuff. So this group of clinicians will work together to consult the American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association. In other words, reshift our focus from managing with medicine to managing with lifestyle. So there's hope. We just have to build this coalition up, and then we're going to use that as a foundation. My role within the coalition is to focus on communities of color. So I'm going to try to make sure communities of color are getting this information just as quickly as other communities.
Well, thank you, Tony. And I want to just also say that we're working with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Dr. Barnard. So there are a number of physicians that are working at the policy level because we have to remember that the things that show an imbalance in their effect in African-American and other poor communities are because these things are readily available and cheap. The high fructose corn syrup things, all of these snacks and stuff like these things are cheap, and they're cheap because we have had federal subsidies that allow the corn manufacturers to make this stuff below cost and to make these particular things readily available and cheap. And when you put those in communities where people don't have much money, you expect, if you don't expect them to eat more of that, then you've got a hole in your head. So we need to really rethink this, not to mention, and maybe Dr. Jasmine might comment, but there is some use of what happens when you eat these things, which are dopamine receptors, and how many of these things are actually addictive from one point of view. And I think that we can't especially when we're doing hyper concentrated sugars, not just regular sugar, but hyper concentrated sugars, like high fructose corn syrup, which is in everything, including bread and all the snack foods that we eat. And we look at them as harmless, but they are absolutely not, because we're setting our children up for disease later.
You know, Dr. Mason, to your point, a lot of these issues are issues that I consider to be social justice issues, where vulnerable communities don't control what they consume. And I say that because they're surrounded by those choices. Like sometimes people say, well, they're choosing no, those choices are choosing them, because many of them don't have reliable transportation. And so they're at the beck and call of what's within walking distance of them. And so,
which is the gas stations. Yeah. The gas stations. Yeah.
Right. Full of chips, full of candy and all the rest of that. And then you add on top of that these other social determinants of health, where you have poverty, where you have lack of housing, lack of education, and all those things compound why we make the decisions we make. So I was having a discussion with my patient today with a medical student there, and I told my medical student, I said, we cannot outprescribe our patient's lifestyle. I said, there's not enough medicines that we can outprescribe. So my patient told me that was the only person that ever told her that. So I was like, so you come here, you put all the weight on me to solve a problem that you have full control to solve yourself. And so I said, but we have to work together as a team. Yes, there might require some medication that I have to give you, but I also need you to be on the same team as me. And don't like if I'm trying to shoot the ball, don't block the ball. That way, me and you on the same team. So she understood that, and even though it was a sports analogy, but she could appreciate the idea that I needed her full participation. And even with that, to your point, Dr. Mason, there's so much social justice issues that we need to fight, that we need people on a policy level. We need Congressman Davis to be there fighting for communities, challenged communities, communities of color, to make sure that we have options that are healthy for us.
And it's also, I think about from a psychological perspective, more of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if my needs for basic shelter, safety, food, finances, love is not met, then what you're saying to me is really not important, right? Because I may just come to the doctor when I'm in crisis, or to behavioral health when I'm really in crisis, and then I go back and go into the same cycle, and then come back if something else is wrong, or I go to the ER for something, and the cycle continues for some, not all, right? So I'm just thinking about it from that perspective.
Jasmine, earlier, I think you were saying your husband said something to Dr. Mason.
So he was saying praise, hallelujah, or preach. No, when he was talking about, yes, life after COVID. Yes. So
but
he was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
All right. But Dr. Jasmine, I got to say this. I grew up as one of 10 kids in Inglewood. Grew up at 16th, 9th and Low. And none of the people were rich on our block. But the difference was, as we see just not only in that community, but all over America, not most of our meals are not being cooked at home. They're being prepared, maybe not even cooked, but prepared outside of our home. And I don't think you can just say poor people is just because they're poor. No, we were poor, but we had better food choices. We ate rice, we ate beans, we ate peas, stuff that still to this day is cheap. It's cheaper than that other stuff that we're eating. It's just that for a number of reasons if my mama could get up and go clean the houses of the folks that lived over in the Jackson Park Highlands and come back and cook and clean and do all that stuff, I don't think I got really an appetite to hear this other stuff, because those women of those days, they had a lot to do, and they had more kids too. There was 10 of us. So, and we never had any of the junk food. We never had any of that stuff. So we just have to be certain that, and I'm not trying to put the responsibility on the parents alone, because there are other circumstances that we all are aware of. And I don't mean to do that at all. But I do say that we have some choices about what we can feed our kids. And unfortunately, the subsidization for all the high fructose corn syrup, the junk food industries and what have you, have created a situation where they're taking control of our children's minds with all the advertising, with all the colors, the cartoons, the games, the toys. All of those things are designed to hook our children at an early age, get them addicted to this stuff, this garbage food that they're eating, way before we have a chance to do what we should do as parents. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, let me ask you, Dr. Mason.
I do agree.
Some people just don't know how to cook. So how do we get people to the point where they how to cook?
Maybe I can't cook like mama, but I do try my best to see, right? Go on YouTube, I buy magazines, I ask my family members, hey, could you send me that recipe or send me a video, or the recipe? I know I do that because I know that I can't mimic my grandmother's cooking. I don't think I could ever recreate. And I'm just thinking about that back in the day when she would cook. We would play all day and she would cook those healthy meals. Maybe I had crybabies or candy, but as far as healthy meals, like in the kitchen, she actually did, so.
I just never learned how to measure a tench. So I didn't know I couldn't figure that out. So.
And you know what? Do you notice that an older, I'm not going to say seniors, okay? So people who are older, way older, who can really cook, they do use that language of just a tench here, or I can't remember, this is what you do, but they can't tell me. I need to know the teaspoons, the cups. I need to know what exactly, and they can't really give you that, so.
Well, that means you have to cook more, because when you cook more, you know what you're using. I was raised on not measuring anything. You just knew what to put in there, and that's what you did. So when you cook more, you know what. Am I right?
You better preach, girl.
You gotta let the ancestors guide you. You gotta.
I know.
I have a cousin right down this feed who will say, now was that a half a cup of this? Girl, you just put it in. You just don't look like put it in. You just gotta cook more. Lanye Williams said that they need home economics back in the school. I think home economics did teach people how to cook.
Yeah. No, but Nikki, I think to your point, that what we don't do is we don't watch. I could cook everything. All of us can cook. All of my brothers, all of my siblings cook. You know why? Because my mama had one rule, to your point, Representative Davis. She said anybody to eat need to know how to cook. Mm-hmm. That was a simple rule. So she said, well, do you eat? Yes. Then you need to know how to cook. So what does that mean? You stand there and watch me. And you learn not only watch her cook, but you had to know how to shop. So you had to know, I knew what all the greens looked like. I didn't need no sign, no turnip green, mustard green. I could look at the leaf and know that's a mustard, that's a collard, that's a turnip. We don't have that anymore. I shouldn't say we don't, but I'm just saying that there's some things that we have to take on as uncles, aunties, grandmothers, grandfathers, that sort of thing. And that's what we do have control over. And some things that we can make sure happens in our families.
Yeah, Dr. Miller was teaching people how to cook rice when we were setting up the other night. He was literally teaching us. He said, "No, you don't stir the rice. That rice do its own thing. It's gonna be all right." Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, no, I was just saying the big problem now is being able to get the attention of our young people, because it does take paying attention, and that's you have a lot of competition now as opposed to in yesteryears when you really didn't have that much to do. You had played all day, so you was tired, so you could come in and sort of watch and really didn't get that fatigue. But now the attention span for watching somebody to cook for these young people is very short. So that's another problem, as well as you're competing with the taste of the things that are on the market that is not good for you, but they taste good to you. And so that's another problem there.
Yeah, and it is all about convenience. I'm just thinking about this whole Uber Eats. I mean, deliveries in the midst of COVID is just all about convenience. But again, it goes back to Dr. Mason and everyone. It is about choice. But I think a lot of people in this day and time, it's all about convenience, and this new generation, my generation, whatever else own, right? It's just different priorities, just from my experience and what I feel like I'm seeing out there. So
Yeah, we got to cook more. We have to cook more. That's important. That's important. Dr. Mason, there was a comment here. I got to read just a few of these because I know you guys will say, "Nikki, you didn't say what I said." So, Mary Ballinger says, "Thank you, Dr. Tony Hampton, for your honesty." She also shares that she's almost 68. She has no pre-existing health conditions, and she took her first Pfizer vaccine on last Monday morning. She said she had some very minimal symptoms, but other than that, she was great. She seems to be okay, and she wanted us to know that she took. Are so proud of you. Grace Gary says these are some great topics. Yolanda Williams says I just told my family that when we were little we didn't have a piece of meat. She also says that we ate what was cooked for dinner or you didn't eat, so there was no extra going out or doing anything. Or Kathleen Jackson, of course, is chuckling to some of the things that Dr. Mason has said, because even though Dr. Mason is telling the truth, he lets you know it he entertains you with it. Sometimes Linda Johnson says some young people look at cooking as time consuming. I'm trying to find where is it at when one young lady said, and we're getting so many comments that went past. But one thing that she did say, she said, "Dr. Mason, we have changed our eating habits because of you." So Dr. Mason, he's gonna remind you to stay away from those chips, and he gives it to you real candid and honestly about why potato chips is just the devil. So he's gonna tell you that those potato chips are the devil, and to stay away from them, and give you all the body reasons why you should not. And to all of the men here, do not ask Dr. Mason about fried chicken, because he will scare you talking about fried chicken. So stay away from the fried chicken. Maybe have one piece every 3 months, because he's gonna tell you about that fried chicken. Our next question says, she says, "Hi, my name is Amy. Since people are receiving vaccines, can you share when you think we will be able to come out of these masks?"
Well, hey everybody, thanks for letting me join. Hi Nikki. Sorry I missed the first half. One of the things we see coming down the pike is we are beginning to see a rise in cases. Look what's happening kind of in Michigan, where Michigan, sorry, and look what's happening overseas. So if you look at how we look at the influenza virus, right? We look at what's happening overseas in the East, right? And then that's how we know what's coming to the US pretty soon. So when you look at the rising cases in the UK, you look at the rises of cases that are going on there, we can expect to right now continue to stay the course. One of the things that you can do to protect yourself even more now is we have vaccination options out in the city of Chicago. I woke up and texted my friend. I said, "Guess what? Today in Chicago, everybody, because let me get the exact BMI. Is it 26 or what's the BMI qualification? So today, the guidelines or the phases in the city of Chicago changed where more people have the option to get vaccinated, right? People with more pre-existing conditions. So essentially, everybody except that fits in the vaccine. So Pfizer 16, but um Moderna and Johnson 18, everybody that fits in there, BMI of 60, diabetes, high blood pressure, the essential worker list has expanded to clergy and, different things. There's so many people. The only people that cannot get vaccines are people too young to get the vaccine, right? People with allergies, and the list of stuff on there, like I don't know, a lot of medicines or things like that with that in there, right? And then people with body mass index kind of below 24, 25 who are healthy. So say I got a body mass index of 20, but I have asthma, I can get the vaccine. So right now, as of today, the eligibility criteria for vaccines have vastly expanded. To answer your question, when will we come out of mass? Specifically, I don't know. I don't anticipate that we're not coming out of mass anytime soon because we have the rise in cases. But if you're worried about whether or not your body can fight off COVID, should you get it, we have the answer to that is we have more options. You're still going to wear your mask because we got the rise in cases. Just stay the course. I don't know if Nikki, I haven't really looked and seen if you pull out any of your fancy masks. Miss Fancy Mask Nikki. I don't know. I think your masks have been kind of these, but hey, I say, hey, lend it to the wardrobe. As they say, what was that movie in Boomerang? You got to coordinate. Don't coordinate your mask. Let it be a piece of your wardrobe. And we always talk about lemons, making lemonade out of lemons. Now we got different mask options. They're cute, and that's where I would focus my attention until we'll stay the course until we get to the other side. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. I mean,
there will be some
I think
studies.
oh, go ahead.
There's some studies that will help us answer that question. I was listening to Dr. Fauci this weekend, and he talked about a study that's being done with the college kids, about 12,000 or so college kids, University of Colorado, et cetera. And I think it's COVID University study, right? And that study's purpose is to see if the vaccine blocks asymptomatic transmission of the virus. So if we can show that you can actually get the vaccine and not transmit it, that would make people feel more comfortable. Ultimately, that'll be part of the data they'll use to make the decision. At the end of the day, what Dr. Maya was saying, it's going to ultimately is what's going on in the environment. If we see rises in cases, that's going to really be the final determination. But again, make sure as you're gathering information, you want to listen to President Biden's advisor, which is Dr. Fauci, and not other resources that may lead you astray. Focus on those sources, and then it'll guide you in the right direction. But I do agree with my colleagues. Be patient and just kind of, get comfortable. And then when you're able to gather in small groups and people in the group are vaccinated, or you have people in the group who are low risk, you can certainly take your mask off in those small gatherings.
Okay, we have another question. What screening tests should we do? Should we have every year, and why? I think it's like a general screening question.
How much time do you got?
Right.
There's so many. I'll throw a couple
version.
at you. My mom is a breast cancer survivor, and that's not a HIPAA violation. She has always asked me to speak about that. So we want to start screening our breasts. It's certainly it depends on your risk. I would say for a lot of people, they really want to be thinking about 40 and all the way up to 74 if you've done well with that. And it tends to be an annual test. It depends on, see, all these recommendations depend on who you ask, right? So some people say every year, somebody will say every other year. So I'll throw that out. We want to do the colon test. And by the way, if I have a person in my family who had colon cancer at 40, I better do mine earlier, right? So I may have to hit it a little earlier, 5 to 10 years, maybe even 10 years earlier. But in general, you want to start at around 45 or 50. I would say in communities of color, you may want to get your colon cancer screen closer to 45, especially Black men, et cetera. So just think about, but 50 for sure. And then I'll throw out, one more, maybe the prostate. And I remember, when I had a prostate exam as a man, and now we have more choice, but I tell you, I'll never forget that experience. And I understand why people cringe, and we shouldn't cringe, because our sisters have been doing pap smears and things like that for years, and we cringe about something like that. It's not a speculum. It's, in some ways it's easier, but ultimately you want to get your prostate. You have to have a decision with your doctor. Am I doing a exam with my prostate with a finger test? Am I doing a PSA? A lot of my patients elect to do a PSA, or prostate specific antigen, as opposed to the digital rectal exam, because they are more comfortable with that. And you can start that certainly, like I said, 45, 50 for sure. And I'll just throw those out because there's so many. I'll let my colleagues comment on some other screening tests that we need to be thinking about.
Dr. Maya?
Well, everybody knows I'm going to talk about screening for HIV.
Yes.
Why do I do it? Right? Because we are, in the terms I do use in clinic, there are a couple of things that humans do in order to occupy the earth, right? We urinate or pee, we poop, we breathe, we eat, and we have sex. It's part of life. As a matter of fact, everybody I'm looking at on this panel, we're here because our parents engage in something that's natural, which is sex, right? And so just like as you take in nutrition and you part of activity, those are things you do to keep your body going, and you screen for the things you eat. Like Dr. Mason, Dr. Hampton, you talk about those things. We do so many screenings. You screen your colon, you screen, you get your pap smear, you screen your chest or your breast. You get those screenings you need to screen for your sexual health, right? Now, why is that important? And why is it important I talk about it here? Because in certain communities, and I'm speaking and leaning to African American communities and Latinx communities, historically, those things aren't normalized, and historically, they haven't been normalized and talked about, right? So people you don't talk about it at your table. You don't come in and say, hey, I got diabetes, blah, blah, blah. You say that at your table, you'll say it in the doctor's office. A lot of times, because we don't talk about it as much, our doctors don't talk about it as much, right? We talk about work-life balance. We talk about things going on at work, things going on at home, personal relationships, friendships. We got to talk about your sexual health. So the recommendation is 16 to 64, and areas where there is sexual activity, you should screen every year. So if you live and love in Chicago, you need that screening. And it's time we normalize that conversation and have it, right? Because not having that conversation in your doctor's office does not mean it does not occur, right? And we've seen a rise in, and now it's not like HIV is a diagnosis of death, right? There are medicines once a day. You live a long, healthy life, right? So it's time we normalize it. And people living with HIV medicines every day and have their viral load suppressed. There's zero, can I say it again? 0 times in history has I'm gonna get real close. 0 times in history, y'all, has somebody, can y'all see my eyeball? Has somebody with HIV who took their medicines every day, pass it on to their babies, their lovers? 0 times. U equals U. And we found that out in 2000, I want to say 17, and we're still excited about it. So have that conversation with your loved ones today. Okay.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Maya. I wanted to say one point. Oftentimes, from a holistic perspective, because we're all here, all of our disciplines here. When we think about labs and things that we need to get checked, we also, I kind of want to throw in the mental health portion. Obviously at Near North, I'm fortunate to be able to be integrated within primary care, internal medicine. But sometimes I think if physicians, if you have it in your EMR system, or nurses, because I know you all are so busy, right? Sometimes a mental health provider is not available, but administering the PHQ or the GAD to kind of screen for anxiety and depression, because I know sometimes others may trust you all as their provider before they come see behavioral health. So I think that also should be a part of a routine screening. When we think about mental health and wellness, SAMHSA have created those 8 dimensions. And again, social, emotional, all of that is included, financial, your physical health, including HIV, whatever comes to the table. I actually think that individuals should start outlining and putting that on the table moving forward, specifically after what 2020 has shown us. Okay, so.
I would only ask or think that one of the things I'm working on and want to work on more is I really think the most important screening tool that we may need or use is a dietary history. Because based on getting an analysis of what people are eating, it doesn't have to be, it has to just be what people are eating. And you can tell, because first of all, we need to get rid of this idea of symptoms. Because there is not one symptom of any disease that you have, particularly cancers, in their early stages, that is the most curable. So most symptoms are late in the disease, not early. So that's why I don't really go for symptoms that much. So, but if we if we begin to normalize this sort of way that we eat, and we can correlate that with disease, we can say that if you come in and you have a history and you eating X amount of chicken from a certain place 3 or 4 times a week. And I'd like to work with people on doing that, because that to me gets us to this thing earlier at a time that we can really do something about it. And people need to understand, when you're taking medicine, the medicine does not treat the cause of the problem. It treats the complication, but it doesn't do anything for the problem. So yes, you can take and should take your blood pressure medicine to keep your blood pressure normal, but you got to understand you could take that blood pressure medicine for 40 years and you will never get rid of your high blood pressure. So what we need to do is also re-educate people on what they can do to get rid of the problem rather than just manage its complication. So that would be my 2 cents.
And I never took anybody off of medication in my entire career until I did what Dr. Mason said. And people say, how do you have time to talk about diet? Well, how do you not have time? If that's the only thing that's going to heal people, how do you not have time? So when I started doing that, they started getting off insulin. They started getting off these pills. So if anybody's a clinician listening tonight, please start putting some time into what heals people. And then you'll become the healer that God intended you to be.
Yeah. Hey, to you guys' points, I had a patient who wanted the continuous glucose monitor, the skin glucose monitor. She actually thought that it had some therapeutic benefit. And I had to tell her that does nothing for your diabetes. It only monitors what's going on with your blood sugar. I said, still the work is up to you. We got to choose better options for you to eat, or else that thing's going to read whatever your blood sugar is. It's not doing anything for your diabetes. Right. So I think you're right. We do have to spend more time as clinicians telling people that we can't outprescribe their lifestyle. We can't do it. There's not enough medicines in our books to keep us from, or keep their bodies from doing something that they are constantly taking all day, every day, 365 days in a year. So I think we have to do that. The other thing I'll mention is that sometimes I think people believe that there's some power in these screening tests, as if Okay, I have a low PSA. Now all of a sudden I'm saved. No, if you continue a lifestyle full of a high fat, low fiber diet, you will eventually develop prostate cancer. So your low PSA today means nothing about what you're going to get tomorrow. So I think we have to tell people that I'm glad you're coming to get these tests, but you have to change your lifestyle in order to. Same thing with the HIV. Great, you got a negative HIV test. You're going to minimize your sexual partners. You're going to wear a latex condom. But if you don't do those things, tomorrow your HIV test could be positive. So we've got to talk to people about actually doing the hard work that it takes to reduce the risk for chronic disease in our community.
Yeah, one of the other things that you guys are really bringing to up is the fact that in addition to being healthier, well, that's also a way of lowering the cost of healthcare. You got to eat, but you don't necessarily have to take medication if you are controlling the disease by what you eat. So we're hearing this all the time. The cost of healthcare is going, out of control. And so one of the things that we can do is invest in prevention. If we prevent a lot of these problems, these, as you said, these symptoms and these and control these problems better with how we eat and how our activities are, then that helps to cut down on the cost of healthcare.
This is simply marvelous, as always. It is such a refreshing conversation. But I am about to say what I know all of you don't want to hear, and that is we have reached our time. So we're going to wrap up, but I'm just going to share a few comments really quickly, and we're going to wrap up. Into the young, I am going to ask this question because she's asked me about 8 times, and then I think 10 other people kind of chimed in and asked the same question. So I think this question might be really quick. And the question is, when does having a stop?
Say it one more time, Nikki. Sorry.
The question is, when does having a pap smear stop? Don't all jump at that answer at the same time.
Go ahead, Maya.
So that's definitely a discussion with your doctor. It's not something that, like, if I say, hey, because it depends on so many other things. It depends on whether or not you had a history of a pap smear, whether there were some questions or was it normal. It depends on whether or not there is a cervix, or whether or not you had an operation to remove your uterus and your cervix, things like that. In general, what we know is you generally start at the time, people all like to say 21 you start, and we know that or in urban areas and in Chicago, the time when people start having sex is about 12 years old, and we're not advocating or not advocating. I'm talking science, and like I said, I brought up sex before because literally if humans didn't have sex, we would fall off the face of the planet. We would die as a race. So we're just talking about what is, right? So I like to start talking about having sexual wellness screening for people with cervixes about a year after you start having sex, and then that determines if you have an abnormal one, you go every 6 months. If you have something you have to take out, you follow closely. Then if you have a normal one, you can go from once a year to every 2 to 3 years, and then you can end up going to every 5 years. And if you're living with HIV or things like that, then that may go to once a year. So I always say, when it comes to that question, I never, because I've gotten bitten, I've given a hard and fast before, according to guidelines that necessarily don't actually address populations that need cervical health screenings more. And so I would say, ask your doctor every year. If you have what was a normal one 2 to 3 years ago, you can start to skip years, and unless you have some other caveats. People living with HIV, people with a history of having other sexual wellness, STIs, things like that, they need them more. So have that conversation with your doctor. If you're not, there are sexual wellness clinics in the city of Chicago and different FQHCs. You can drop in and just say, hey, I want to talk about my sexual health. Dr. Pete, did I miss anything? Oh, and then they usually stop. Sorry. Sometimes they stop around age 64. Sometimes you can stop around 74. So you just have to have that conversation.
Pete had a small emergency and had to jump off.
Oh.
So, Yolanda Williams says, to the professionals on this panel, this is simply amazing. We thank you for spending time with us and talking about things in our community and treat our whole mind, body, and spirit. You teach and entertain us. This is the best Monday night date. Kathleen wants to talk about some natural treatments for high blood pressure, and I also see your part 2, Kathleen Jackson, so we'll definitely be discussing that later among the great panel that is here. Mary Ballinger says, this info is priceless and life essential. Says, thank you guys so much for the great conversation again. Lanya Williams says, thank you for sharing your knowledge, wisdom, and time with us. You are a wonderful group of people. Roger Washington actually says, looks like a great time, and thank you so much. So, as we always do, we go around that panel and we ask your until next Monday. So, Doug, what's your until next Monday?
So when you go to the grocery store and you go to some place like Home Depot, I'm going to recommend that you go to the self-checkout line. And the reason I do that is if you ever get stuck in line, the ordinary line, to the right of you got the chips, to the left of you got the candy bars, and you got the magazines about food. And that's designed deliberately. They know that you're hungry, you're thinking about food, and they want you to buy that stuff with your last dollar. So let's not step into that. Let's go to the self-checkout and stay healthy.
All right. Okay. Dr. Jasmine, you're until next Monday.
I think these past 3 months, I've really been looking at SAMHSA. They have this 8 dimensions of wellness, thinking about mental health. My recommendation is if you have a computer or you're using your phone, Google SAMHSA, that's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. Their website is called the 8 Dimensions of Health. They have different dimensions thinking about mental health. And I want you to look at those dimensions and have an aha moment, perhaps asking yourself, maybe there's one dimension that I could work on within the next 7 days until next week. So I would leave that. So.
Wow. Okay. All right. Dr. Terry Mason, you're until next Monday.
Until next Monday, I hope that you take what we've said tonight seriously, as we do every Monday night, and take whatever of it that you can do and try and implement between now and next week, and be safe, and also make certain that you make the people around you safe, the people that you love safe.
All right. Dr. James Miller, you're until next Monday.
I'm so encouraged by the event of yesterday that my until next Monday is that the light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter because we seem to be getting closer to it, but we're not at the light yet, so we still got to be vigilant in our behavior and make certain that we do use all of the mitigations and get vaccinated. Everybody get vaccinated.
All right. Dr. Maya Green, you're until next Monday.
Yeah, until next Monday, I just want to take this time just to add on one more thing about cervical health screenings. One of the things that I tell people to go in and get, in addition to that, even if it's not a full-on cervical health pap smear, is if you have a new partner, you going that kind of restarts your cycle of with when you want to do your sexual health. So don't say, I got a new partner, I just got screened in October, I got a new partner in November, so I'm gonna wait till the next October to get screened. No, you go in and you get your screening, preferably before intimacy, but definitely 6 months or 3 to 6 months after you want to go in and get your screening. And then I just want to add again, City of Chicago, went into a new phase. The phases describe people that qualify for the vaccine. If you don't know, I say you sign up and you show up. Do not count yourself out and think you don't count. Historically oppressed cultures a lot of times think they don't qualify. You go in, count yourself in, and that BMI is actually 30. The body mass index is actually 30. The beautiful thing that I love about my black and brown body is that I can eat a certain way, but when I exercise, I have at the bottom half of me musculature that can get me in that BMI. There you go.
All right. Dr. Hampton, did you do your until next Monday?
No, I'll do it real quick. I want
Because
to.
I got frozen, so I didn't know if you.
No, you're all good.
Go
Dr.
ahead.
Maya made a very good point. I actually had a patient who passed away from cervical cancer years ago. Her husband got married to another person, and then his new partner ended up getting cervical cancer. HPV can be spread. And although, and so anybody that has the opportunity to vaccinate our children with HPV vaccine, please do that. It's another vaccine that will save your life. But it tells you that what Dr. Maya is saying is true. When you get a new partner, you don't know if they are going to increase your risk for HPV, which will increase your risk for cervical cancer. I want to say that, number one. Number two, I wanted to just answer Kathleen Jackson's question. And it's really important to understand that our medications are great. And I consider medications like the Hoover Dam, it holds the water back, right? But if you want to get rid of the water so you won't flood the village, you need to do lifestyle. So I had a patient just today who I saw only 2 months ago, and she had a blood pressure systolic. The top number was 180. She said, I'm not taking medicine. I said, you should use medicine temporarily, like the Hoover Dam. She said, I'm not taking medicine. So we went into our whole lifestyle thing. We talked about intermittent fasting. We talked about reducing the sugar and starch. And the supplements that I recommended to answer her question were garlic. Rather it's the capsules or the natural. Natural is always great if you can be consistent. Apple cider vinegar. I know it tastes crazy, but a tablespoon of that in some water diluted so it won't mess with your tooth enamel. Magnesium. That's good for so many things, but particularly for blood pressure, stress, et cetera, regularity, omega-3. And then I talked about CoQ10. I think she did the first 3, and she came back with a blood pressure of 150, no medicines now. So she was able, and she only lost 5 pounds. So it's a farce to think when you want to be metabolically healthy, you don't have to lose 50 pounds. You just have to create an environment for your body to heal. So I just wanted to answer her question and let her know there is a lot of natural things you can do. I would not advise 180 blood pressure to not take medicines temporarily, but I am going to tell you that it worked for her. So I just wanted to wrap up with that.
Okay. Remember to get vaccinated. Remember to mask up. Stand up and mask up. Congressman, our leader, our vanguard on healthcare, the one who reminds us each and every day that health is wealth. You're until next Monday.
I was glad to hear Dr. Hampton talk about apple cider vinegar because I've been reading this book about how much of a miracle that apple cider vinegar really is. And I've been sort of testing it out a little bit. And it's good for almost everything you can think of. I mean, it is out of sight. And so there are things that we can do. Honest to goodness, there are many things that we can do in terms of knowing our own bodies, knowing what works for us and what does not. And so, again, I just thank you all for helping to educate. Education, I've been told, is something that you do and not just something that you know. That information is something you know. You. But if you're going to call it education, it has to become something that you do. And I think that you all are doing a great job. of changing people's behavior. I mean, you may hear one or two people say, well, Dr. Mason's made me do this, caused me to do that. But if one or two are saying it, then 20 or 30 are doing it. And so change is oftentimes more covert than it is overt. And you can't always pinpoint when the change occurred. But if you keep doing it, keep listening, keep trying it, eventually things are just different. And we wonder how they got that way. Well, they got that way because people were listening and people were learning and people were behaving. So have a wonderful Monday evening. It's been a pleasure. And I thank you all so much. So
All right. So we just want to remind you guys to mask up. Remember to social distance. We are so close. We are so close to where we need to be. So remember to social distance. Stretch those little arms out. And if someone is touching you or you're touching them, just remind them to move back just a little. Remember to wash those hands. Keep them washed really good. Get all in here. Remember to do that. Keep doing it. And remember most of all to wear your mask and wear it properly. Even after COVID, I'm gonna have my mask on because they brought up the fact that flu and pneumonia is down just as well. So remember to wear your mask and to wear it properly. Make sure, as you can see here, that mask is covered, nose and mouth. Keep it over your nose, mask over your nose and your mouth. The droplets are what's important, and you want to keep those out. Thank you guys so very much for being here. Join us right back here next Monday night, same bat time, same bat channel, right here for Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. Thank you. See you next Monday.
thank you so long. Bye-bye.